All right, let's begin. As always, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, and by offering our peace and blessings to our Prophet, we begin our second session of our seminar entitled Knowledge, Structuring the Mind and Awakening the Consciousness. Let's recuperate and go over the things that we saw in the first session. So we agreed on the method of analysis, which is structuralism. It is, of course, a theoretical approach that emphasizes structure and relationships between elements. All right, this is the method of analysis that we are using throughout this seminar. Then we saw how to manage our session, of course, and we saw the outline. Our first lesson was about knowledge. First thing, we defined knowledge. Of course, we are asking the WH questions. What is knowledge? Then we saw the different categories of knowledge, true knowledge and false knowledge. We gave some examples. And then we answered the question of how to make a difference between these different distinctions. Of course, the answer is to have criteria. So we went over the different types of criteria and different examples. So the two different types that we saw are objective criteria and subjective criteria. Then we made a conclusion that objective criteria is the better suited for anyone to reach a correct conclusion. Correct criteria equals correct conclusion. After that, we answered the question of, does knowledge have a price? And the answer was, it cannot be measured in material value. However, the biggest price to pay is to bid farewell to ignorance and comfort and happiness. So we established a relation between consciousness and happiness. We say that the more you're conscious, the less you are happy. The more you are conscious, the less you are comfortable. And at the end, we had a quiz. So I'm keeping the score. And right now, we are going to start the second lesson, entitled The Two Sides of the World. Now, before we dive deep into what do we mean by that, I have a question for you. We have an image here. Can anyone tell me the differences and discrepancies that exist from this image? Can we enumerate the differences between or within this image? It has many differences within. So apply structuralism. You can see the image. First thing, what is this image? And try to understand the structure, the elements inside this image. Yes, Mr. Ois?
Yes. Are we supposed to just hop on and answer the question? Is that
Right,
it?
yes.
Yeah. Perfect. We can notice first of all the center of the image that we have a tree, and the right hand side, from my perspective, of the tree is almost dead and decaying, whilst the left hand side is more fruitful and green and alive. So both sides may represent death and life.
Very good. Right. So, excellent. You did something good, which is first tell the apparent differences. We see that with our eyes, but then you interpreted these differences by understanding that this side presents death, for example, and the other presents life. Very good. There are other differences that go along the same way. For example, we have in the right side the desert. The desert is a barren land with little to no water. Of course, so that also goes with the theme of death and being barren. While on the other hand, we have the ocean, a lot of water, and water is always related to life. So that's why the tree is alive and fruitful and in a good shape. However, what do we have in the middle? Something that exists in both sides.
A path,
Can you repeat, please?
a path.
Right, the path, the bridge. Very good. Is it different from one side to another?
No, it's the same.
Yes, it's the same in both sides. Keep that in mind because that is crucial in understanding the later parts of this lesson. All right. First thing always is the definition. What is or what are we talking about? We're talking about the two sides. First, we need to understand what is a side. Now, a side is a position or a part that exists in relation to another part. We can never have a side without having the other side, or else it would not be a side, because a side has two sides. All right, this is obvious, but it's too obvious that sometimes we miss it. Now, there are two sides of almost everything conceivable in the world. Anything that you can think of, we can find two sides of it. Almost everything. This, we call it the concept of dichotomy. So, dichotomy is this relation between the two sides. Every concept falls under dichotomy. The two extremes. Often these two sides stand opposite of one another, so we call them counterparts. Often, but not always, these sides are contrary to another. They have opposite meaning, but within the same concept. We will give examples later to understand this clearly. Now, why it is important to know these sides? This is very obvious. Why am I going to give a whole lesson about this? Because the world is built on dichotomy. When you look around you, when you look at the world, when you analyze, you find out that we live in dichotomy, within dichotomy. If a person does not know one side, he won't be able to recognize the other. All right, what is the problem with that? Therefore, he won't be able to differentiate between the two. Now, if you don't differentiate between the two, will you be able to differentiate between true knowledge or false knowledge? Of course not. Will you be able to differentiate between truth and lies? No, etc. Thus, leading to confusion and error. You will make errors because you do not understand the way the world works. By understanding dichotomy, it helps you understand how things work. Now let's give some examples to make things clear and to understand what I mean by everything conceivable. We have two sides, of course. Side number one, side number two. Let's start from the up top and go down the middle till the end. First thing, we have angels and paradise. These are things or concepts, both whatever you position yourself to believe in regards to this. So we have on the other side devils and Satan or hell also, paradise. Paradise on one side, hell on the other. Even if you take it metaphorically, in this world, some people live in paradise this world, some people live in hell. Moving on, truth, revelation, and prophets. On the other side, we have falsehood, sorcery, and witches. These are complete extremes of different ends, but the same concept. Let me explain. We're talking about truth and falsehood. We are talking here about information. So information can be truthful, that can be false. All right, it's the same concept. Revelation and sorcery. Here we are dealing with the metaphysics. We are dealing with the unseen. Both sides claim that they can reach this knowledge. All right, so it's the same concept. Prophets and witches, same thing. Prophets are the instruments that God uses to reveal the unseen knowledge. Witches do the same between quotes. They claim to do the same. Also, monotheism, Christ, polytheism, antichrist. Even Christ has an antichrist. You see, so Christ is a messenger. We have the anti-messenger. We have prophets and false prophets. Even this has two extremes. Monotheism, polytheism, are talking about deism here, the belief in a higher being. But they differ. One says one God, the other says different gods. Facts prove reason. On the other hand, you have opinions, myths, and whim. Right? Whim والهوى, while reason عقلانية والمنطق. Facts obviously are different than opinions. They are, in essence, opposite to each other, but sometimes you can make your opinion a fact. All right, this is the best way to do it. Proof and myths, obviously, this is clear. Light, clarity, honesty. On the other side, darkness, mischief, and hypocrisy. Always is the same concepts we are talking about. Goodness, on the other side, we have evil. Above, we have below. So even the sides themselves are in a dichotomy. East, west, south, north. All right, these are dichotomies. So sides also have a side. Clarity, mischief, or ambiguity, we can say. Honesty, hypocrisy. This is clear. We are talking here about transmission of information. Goodness, we already said that. Heroism, on the other side, villainy. So it's the same thing as goodness and evil, but in relation to persons. Strength in relation to weakness. We are here talking about ability, power, this concept of power, which we will see in the next lesson, inshallah. Knowledge, of course, knowledge, the big title. On the other side, we have ignorance. Justice, oppression, wealth, poverty. More dichotomy of concepts. Here, I chose some examples that exist on two different extremes, but not necessarily opposite. All right, the meaning is not really contradictory as much as the examples we saw earlier. Perfection, flaw. All right, these are two extremes of one concept. Natural, artificial. Eternity, ephemerality, and infinity, finality. Immortality in the opposite of mortality. Health in opposite to sickness. Health, we mean good health, obviously, to being healthy. Now, feelings also, all of them, with the exception of few, exist in two different extremes. Happiness, on the other hand, we have sadness, joy, and boredom. Even some neutral feelings sometimes have their opposites. Masculinity, femininity. Here, this is what I mean by saying, yes, it's opposite, but not in the sense that one is good and the other is bad. All right, I didn't mean that. Of course, I had to put it in a place. We can interchange it, no problem. Masculinity with femininity, they are more often on the different extremes. Childishness and maturity, right? This is clear. Then we have afterlife with life. So even the abstract concepts have opposites. They exist in dichotomy. Metaphysicality and physicality. Again, we're talking about the same thing. At last, imagination, reality. So these were simply to give you an example to make it clear, to understand that so many things in this world are built on dichotomy. And by understanding this dichotomy, you understand the characteristics of each side. Now, yes, the question that I already answered. Do all things fall into the dichotomy of things and concepts? Of course, indeed, everything falls in between this dichotomy. However, and this is the key concept here, they are not situated in the same place, nor they are equal in extent. We will explain this extensively in the next slide. For example, a person who does not, or sorry, who does lots of evil and also little good is overall an evil person. We need to make a judgment. He makes a lot of evil, therefore we can say that he is an evil person. But he also does a little good. So what is the position that we should take? But that little goodness stops him from reaching the extreme end of villainy. He is less evil than someone who does lots of evil, but does no good at all. Therefore, he is less. All right, that's what we mean by they are not equal in extent. And this will help us make the correct judgment on each case. We can then say that there are gray areas between each two sides, which we call nuance. All right, this is the critical concept of this session. So we need to understand what is nuance. To better visualize it, I came up with this example. This is one way to visualize it. We will see another way. Now we here have some concepts: goodness, evil, and human nature. Within these concepts, we have different characteristics, different things that fall under this concept. For example, goodness. Within we have truth. Truth is part of goodness, of course. Truth leads you to goodness. Also, we have sacrifice. Sacrifice is a beautiful thing. Now, in evil, we have deceit, which is more or less the opposite of truth. They exist in extreme ends of each other. In human nature, we have emotions and desires. Human nature, emotions and desires, some of it can be good, some of it can be evil. Some of it is neutral. It can be used whether in good or bad. It depends on the person. And that's why these circles interact with each other. They intersect. So these gray areas here, I'll draw it. This side, on this place, this is the gray area, where goodness and evil meet, or when human nature meets with goodness and evil. And this is a great example because it applies to everyone. Anyone has, this illustration, but some people have one circle much bigger than the other. This is the point. Now let's see this gray area, the nuance. We have selfishness and we have fear of death. Now, selfishness is usually attributed to evil. But is it evil all the time? Is it evil all the time? The answer is no. Sometimes being selfish can be a good thing, can lead to a good thing. For example, if someone uses your good side, for example, and pushes you to an extent where you are hurting yourself, your nature or your goodness tells you to stay unselfish, to do the good thing. But is it really the good thing here to keep on doing it while you are hurting yourself without any real reason to do that? Then here we can say that selfishness can be good to a certain extent, of course. Now, fear of death. That's related to sacrifice and emotions and desires. We are built with this instinct for instance, to live and to stay alive. Everyone is afraid of dying, let's say. Of course, not everyone, but most people. So this is normal. This is part of human nature. That's what makes sacrifice such a beautiful thing, such a great thing. And that is why, not only in Islam, but in every religion, the concept of martyrs is the greatest thing to achieve in this world. The one who dies for his principles, his ideas, and beliefs. That's why God promises the best reward for the martyr, because it's such a hard thing to do. It's to go against your instincts. However, is it always a bad thing to fear dying? Of course not. Sometimes you need to preserve yourself. Sometimes you need to save yourself when you are fighting a losing battle, for example, which has no benefits. Okay, sometimes you can even fight losing battles, dying with your honor and pride for your correct beliefs. That's still a beautiful thing. But sometimes people fight for incorrect reasons. So in their cases, it's much better to fear dying than to die on that thing. All right. So in this case, it exists in this gray area. We cannot put it either in this side or in the other, but we need to put it somewhere. So where can we put it? It's in this gray area. Yes, Mr. Rashid.
I have something to add here. People who fear death, they don't fear death for the same reason. For example, you can fear death because you feel that you are not prepared yet to die. That's
Very
not the
good.
same as someone who fears death because he wants to just to live as long as he can.
Excellent. Wonderful example. Yes, some people are afraid to meet their creator. Why? Because they are not ready to be judged. And in principle, this is a beautiful thing. This is, at least you are aware of your doings. But someone who wants to live, just to live more and to enjoy this life, is a totally different thing. So the motives, very good. Motives play a role in this gray area. So your motives can take you from one side to another. Motives are part of nuance. That's what we will see in this slide. This is a better way to put each thing into its proper place. We have here a spectrum. We can also express nuance by the different degrees and sizes it can take on a spectrum. Here we have a spectrum. We have 0 at the middle, which represents neutrality. And we have the two extremes that we talked about. This is dichotomy. Of course, two extremes must be equal in length. I'm talking about the extreme end of goodness, for example, and the extreme end of villainy, evilness. and at the middle we have neutrality. Now here, I would like to say that there is nothing that is totally neutral. Nothing in this world is totally 100% neutral. Even if we put it right here, this is still not neutral, but it's very close. Why? Because it it has or it combines both aspects of the two extremes. Now let's put an example of the same person that we talked about. He does lots of evil. Let's say evil is in this side and righteousness in this other side. He does a lot of evil. So if we stop here, we can put it at 5, lots of evil, or even 4, let's say 4. But when we add that he does little good, what happens then? Does he remain in the same place? This is a question for you. Does he remain in the same place that we said? If you want to measure this person, like we said, criteria. Yes, Mr. Chef?
No, as you said, that this little good will prevent him to reach the extremity of the bad, of evil.
Excellent. So let's say that he was at number 5. This little good, where will it remove him from? It will take him to
Number four.
number 4, for example. If he does more than just a little good, it takes him to number 3. Now, what is the purpose of doing this? You might say this is obvious. The purpose of this is to reach the right conclusion, the precise conclusion. It's not fair to say that this person right here is the same person as the one who is here. It's not fair. The same way that you cannot say the person who is on the extreme end of goodness is the same place as the one who is at number 1. It's not fair, it's not correct, it's not precise. It will lead you to the wrong conclusions. Therefore, you are not using an objective criteria to reach the right conclusion. All right? This is why it's very important to understand the concept of nuance in relation to dichotomy. Here now, there are two kinds of people who may use or not use this spectrum. Subjective people that we talked about previously claim that nuance is more important than the overall judgment, and that it overcomes whatever objective truth there could be. Let's understand this carefully. They agree that nuance exists, but they say this nuance is much bigger than to put it on a spectrum. For example, they say, or they like to say, you should not judge people. This is their biggest motto, to not judge anyone. Why? Because you're not in his place, you do not know what he went through, you don't know his reasons. Each one has his separate life. You should mind your business, etc. Different reasons that they give, which are not objective criteria, of course. So they say that this nuance is much bigger than the overall judgment. You cannot give a judgment. You can only say your own personal opinion. You might say your opinion, and even then, they find the problem with that. So for them, this nuance overcomes the objective truth. For them, there is no spectrum. The spectrum does not exist for subjective people. Everything floats. There are no extremes, no extremity, simply neutrality. They float in the middle. Everything floats in the middle. There is no spectrum. So, of course, you cannot give any judgment. Now, on the other hand, objective people claim that nuance is not sufficient to overcome the overall judgment based on objective truth. Objective people claim, they say, that nuance is not sufficient. Yes, nuance exists, but you cannot tell me that it prevents us from saying the overall judgment. Why? Because they use this spectrum. This spectrum is an objective criteria, and it helps them precisely tell whether something is extremely on one side or in the other. All right, so they agree that nuance exists. Of course, you cannot deny it, and it plays a role in giving the judgment. If you don't take it in consideration, then you will not, as we said, reach the right conclusion. However, do we go outside of this spectrum? Do we go outside of this circle that we drew? No, we do not. So therefore, the overall judgment is always there, but the degree and the size differs depending on the different elements, the different motives, etc. So as a conclusion, nuance is certainly important and must be taken in consideration when making a judgment, of course, but not to the extent of neutralizing this said judgment. It can only alter the degree of where a certain thing or aspect can be placed within the spectrum. So this is very clear and very rational. Anyone with the sound reason will understand and accept that this is an objective criteria which helps us make the correct conclusions and judgments. Now, one thing to add, because I'm making the subjective people look really bad. Here, I have to criticize objective people for one thing. Not all of them, of course, but some objective people tend to be superficial. They tend to be one-dimensional. How so? By not taking in consideration the gray area. When you don't take it in consideration in your judgment, then everything is the same for you. It's either one side or the other. يا بيضايق على كما كيقولوا. And it's not always the case. Therefore, you become or you look superficial, and this is where subjective people can make you look bad, and they prove you to be wrong because you're denying the existence of nuance, and you cannot deny something that exists. So you give them an argument against you, and this is bad to do when you are in a debate or when you are taking a position in general. So that's why objective people should always take in consideration this nuance and make the proper conclusion. Now we finally reach the quiz part. In this case, I did not put all the questions in the same slide so that no one prepares before. All right. But before that, let's have a Q&A session, 10 to 15 minutes. Let's argue, let's share our thoughts and ideas about the things that we saw. Everyone is welcome, of course, whether by sound or by chat. Anyone who has a question, of course, feel free. If anyone wants to add something also. Seems like no one has any questions. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm open. Do you ascribe yourself as an objective person or a subjective person? Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Unfortunately, I've missed most of the lecture, but I just want to add one thing.
Right,
Uh,
please.
is that I think that most people that are objective are reasonable people, unlike people who are subjective that are more uh, emotional.
Definitely,
And
because we said
this,
that emotional people or subjective people do not have a spectrum to judge by. Right.
yes, and this is of course not generalizing, but this mainly applies to males and females. Like females, most of them are subjective, unlike males. Well, this is not generalization, but it's like
All right, I agree in the
general.
sense that if we take a woman stripped from, you know, if a woman has an objective criteria, then she tends to be objective, but still she is less objective than the man. If we have the same type, I agree with you in this sense. Why? Because naturally they are
How
born
they're built. Yes, how they're built.
exactly. So it's part of their human nature. We saw human nature
Yes,
here. So how can we visualize it? We can say that this circle is bigger for the female,
yes,
much
yes.
bigger.
Yeah,
Therefore, sometimes it can lead to more goodness, but sometimes it can lead to more evil. So it depends
of
how
course.
they use it.
Use it. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your participation.
Please,
Yes,
I want to add that even the type of people you mentioned that they don't admit that there is a gray area. Sometimes it's also because of emotion. The people who say either black or white. Sometimes that's also because of emotion. They don't want to accept that there is some gray area.
yes, definitely. And why is that? Because they are using a subjective criteria in that particular aspect. You see, even though overall they can be objective, sometimes they can be subjective. And whenever you use the subjective criteria, you are prone to be false. You are prone to be or to make error. There is the very bad thing about subjective criteria. So all of this strengthens what you already said and saw in the first session, which is if you want to reach the truth, if you want to be right, if you want to make the correct conclusions, use an objective criteria. However, add with that, taking in consideration nuance. This is what we reached so far in our seminar. This is the conclusion in general. Now let's start the quiz. All right. This case, I do not need to write it on the chat. So anyone, I will count from 1 to 3 and get on your keyboards and write the answer of the first question. Of course, I'm keeping score for those who are interested to participate in the competition. So what do we call two opposing sides? I already mentioned the name for it. So what is it? One, two, three. Write down the answer to that. Everyone is welcome to participate just for fun and to retain the information that we saw. It's a form of a revision. All right. Next question. Do all concepts fall into dichotomy? How so? So say whether yes or no, and then give short reason, explanation. How do they fall into dichotomy? 1 minute to answer this question. Seems like the exam this time is harder. All right. Let's move on to the next question. What do we mean by the gray area or the nuance? What do we mean by it? Give me a definition, give me some characteristics, or define what is nuance. Keep it as simple as possible. Okay, moving on to the question before last. Is nuance enough to neutralize objective truth? And give the reason why. Is it enough to dismiss the objective truth or to say that it's bigger, more important? And why so? using the spectrum that we saw, you can get the answer. All right. And finally, the last question. What could make objective people superficial at times? Give me the instances, the reasons that could make an objective person who has an objective criteria end up looking superficial, looking one-dimensional, or sometimes even silly. This is the grand question of this quiz. 3 points. The golden question. Don't worry, I got it. Yes, the latter part is the answer of this question. Right? 15 seconds. You can keep it short. One big reason why they may appear superficial. All right, time is up. I will keep your answers and keep the score, inshallah. So this was everything that we have for this lesson, the two sides. I think we went not too much extensively, but enough to understand the basic concepts, concept of dichotomy, the concept of nuance, and the spectrum. So I would like all of you to use this spectrum or this illustration to understand and place things in their proper places. Why? To reach the right conclusions. In order to reach the ultimate truth, the truth of all truths. So, thank you all for your attention, for your time. I greatly appreciate it. It was always nice to interact with you, although the interaction wasn't as much as it was in the first session, even the number of attendants, but no problem. And thanks for the newcomers also. We expect more as the seminar goes on. If you still have any questions, please feel free. If not, I thank you once again and I bid you farewell until the next session. Right, the kids. Yeah, one of them apologized. She could not come. The other one, I think she did not see the email. Next time, inshallah. They played a big role in making the session interactive and fun. All right, you may leave. Take good care of yourselves. Thank you, Mr. Tawfiq. We appreciate it. Appreciate your presence. And see you again next session. Again, inshallah, should be the day before tomorrow. I think I said the day before tomorrow. The day after tomorrow. Yes, I will make sure to bring them here. Yeah, for those who were not able to attend, don't worry, this has been recorded. I will later stream it or put it in my YouTube channel, and you will be able to go back and attend the whole thing. All right, let's stop the recording.